Welcome everyone to our first after party episode. We have been getting such great feedback and questions from you guys that we didn't want you to have to wait a couple of weeks to hear from us. So we decided to do a little brief episode answering any questions and responding to some feedback we've gotten. So this is the after party for episode 7, where we were talking about situationships.
Yes, the after party meaning like very early in the evening after party.
Yes, this is the time that we party. We're recording mid-afternoon, which is our best time to party.
Unlike the after parties we used to go to that started at midnight.
Oh my God, do you remember when we used to leave to go out at 10 p.m.?
Yes.
I don't know how we did it.
I don't either. I can't even.
Nope. One of the things that we have gotten from people is, I think I know who you're talking about, or are you talking about me? And that just reminded us of our favorite Carly Simon song, to which we would say,
You're so vain.
You probably think this podcast is about you. That's right.
Woohoo.
You know, a lot of people. And if it sounds like you, could be you, or could be someone else like you. I wouldn't worry too much about it, honestly.
We will reiterate that we are both a little bit older, and we have a lot of history. And we have a lot of history. So we have a lot of stories, a lot. And so it is highly unlikely that even though it sounds familiar to you, it is highly likely it's not you.
Yes, very true. And if it is, okay, maybe you'll be podcast famous someday when we shoot to the top of the charts.
That's right. And if it is, and you think it is, for God's sake, if you don't want anyone to know, don't out yourself, because no one else is going to know.
No one else knows it's you. So good point. I like that. I like that. And on that similar note, we have, or I should probably say because Rachel tends to be probably nicer than I am in some ways, but I have gotten a little bit of feedback when I've talked about certain things that might seem a little edgy or maybe a little direct about mental health or about relationships. The first thing I will say is that I take my job as a therapist very seriously, and I take my client's confidentiality very seriously. I will never talk about a client in any way in which they could be identified. So if I bring an issue in from therapy, it's an issue that many, many clients are having that I think would be relevant to the general population. The other thing I want to say is that I always want to be kind. So if I'm talking about something in a lighthearted way, I may poke fun at an issue. I would never poke fun at an individual in a mean-spirited sort of way. That's just not who I am. And I hope that what you guys get from us is that we always want to talk about things in an informative way. And we also poke fun at ourselves. So part of it is be lighthearted. And if you do hear something that sounds like you on the podcast, is it something that maybe you need to laugh at yourself about? Or is it something you need to get pissed off at because someone's talking about you on a podcast?
Well, I will speak to that. I can confirm that Dr. Kyle does take her practice very seriously. And she also has some of the best boundaries of any individual I know. And we both very much subscribe to being kind. At the same time, we are going to talk about some issues that need to be talked about. And sometimes they're just hard to hear. And we don't think that if you're not, I mean, a lot of people won't talk about them, and we need to put them out in the light of day, because we feel like these are helpful things. And yes, we're getting a lot of feedback that people find them to be helpful. So
yes, for sure. And I will also say that most of us have some kind of minor or major mental health issues. You don't really make it to adulthood without having experienced some kind of trauma or some kind of anxiety or some kind of depressive symptoms. And so that is a part of most people's lives. And what we're saying on this podcast is that may not be what you want to lead with on the first date. You want to be honest and you want to be open about it. But you know, if you have a bunion, you probably don't want to tell people that on the first date. Like, let's, lead with the good stuff and let the other stuff emerge in a natural, organic way. So
well, and feet can be a thing, and in the lesbian world, I'm just going to say. So be careful with that.
That could be its whole own episode. I hadn't thought about that. The feet issue.
Feet.
Yes, absolutely true.
We're just going to leave that right there. But all
Yep.
of our lesbian listeners out there know that sometimes those feet can get kind of close. They got to be nice.
They can. And I would also like to say that if I'm ever in the dating world again, which I hope I'm not, to my wife, Jo, I'm going to say I hope I'm not. But I cannot have anyone touching me with their feet.
Oh, it's right. I had forgotten about that. It's true.
Speaking of mental health problems. No, I do. When I see someone barefooted sitting next to me and their foot starts inching over close to me in any way, I have a very strong sense that I've got to get away from it.
As we said, we all have some degree of mental health issues, and I'm sure that there's a name for that. But
there probably is.
Okay.
So on our last episode, we discussed situationships, and we had a lot of people coming back and talking to us about situationships. That was a fun one, and it was one that perhaps went into a little more seriousness than we had in the past episodes. But I think it was one that might have struck a nerve with some people. So, Rachel, do you want to talk some about what you might have heard from people or the questions that you got around this episode?
Yeah, I got a great question about what do we think about people who stay in a situationship forever or for extended period, just always stay in it. What does that say about them or the situationship? And I had a conversation with that person. It was really interesting. I thought it was a great question because there may be an assumption that if you stay in a situationship, that's a negative thing automatically. But it may not be if two people know why they're in it. If both people find that situation to meet their needs and they are very clear about what they want from it and it is giving them that, then that to me is a consensual relationship that may not look I don't know, common, but it works for two people, which is very different than people staying in a situationship where they are just doing something because they're afraid to not be, either they're scared to leave it, or they think they're in something and maybe the other person is thinking it's something else. I mean, you have something to say about that.
Yes, I do. I've got a lot to say about that, of course.
We're never short on words here.
I agree with you that if two consenting adults want to be in something that's undefined, of course you should be allowed to do that. And if that's meeting your needs, do it the rest of your life. That's great. The thing that you addressed second is the most important, and that is when one person thinks or hopes that it's something that the second person does not. And one of our beta testers in our Get Dateable groups had a great question that she asked the guys that she was dating. And that was, is there anyone else who thinks they're in a relationship with you? Because that question is different than, hey, are you seeing anyone else? Because that guy may think, no, I'm not really seeing anyone else, but there might be someone out there who thinks she's his girlfriend. And so I think that gets to the heart of the question. What is there something that you're defining as a situationship or a casual situation, but someone else thinks that you're their partner?
Yeah. It also made me think about, in this conversation I've had with a couple of people, it made me think about the person who's on the outside of that coming into it. Mm-hmm. Is that if you know that person's seeing someone else, and the person that you're trying to interact with is saying, but it's not really, it's just a situationship. It's just,
mm-hmm. Yeah.
Do you, the question is the onus of where does everyone live in that?
Right.
Where is the integrity in all that?
I think that's a great question. And if you think about polyculture, the culture of people who are openly dating or seeing multiple people, one of the foundational pieces of that culture is that everybody has to be completely upfront and honest. And so if you find yourself not telling someone what you're doing on Friday night, then you're probably not practicing those principles.
Yeah.
We know some folks who have been seeing each other, however you want to define that, for years on end. And, you see them around town at events or things like that. And one of them, I believe, also dates other people. So occasionally we will see her out with someone else. I don't think the other person is at the same place. It appears from the outside that both of those people are not on the same page. I think one of them thinks she's in a relationship and the other one thinks that she may casually be dating that person, even though it's been going on for years. And I think that that's unfortunate for the person who's wishing it was something different.
Yes. And you have to wonder after a while, the it is likely that the other person knows that on some level. And to our situationship podcast, if that isn't causing you heartburn and you are okay with that, then that is okay.
Yes.
If you are the person though that thinks you're in a relationship and not a situationship, uh, then that does, if and you're staying in it knowing, then I guess that you just have to ask yourself a lot of questions about that.
Yeah.
And
I bet that person, whoever it is that's in that situation, is probably thinking that it's going to change, that maybe she's going to snag that woman and get her to commit, or she's thinking she doesn't want to bring up the defining the relationship talk, the DTR talk we spoke about on our episode, because if she brings it up, she's afraid it's going to go away altogether. So that's a little bit troubling.
yeah. And to bounce back on this one just a bit, because I have had a personal experience with this integrity question when
Mm-hmm.
there are three people floating around a situationship.
Mm-hmm.
And I had the challenge of my single life in these last 5 years with that situation
Mm-hmm.
where there was someone that absolutely wanted to engage with me and I wanted to desperately engage with them. And I knew that that was not okay with the other person. There was not permission all the way around for that. And that was one of the hardest decisions I have made in my 5 years of being single. It was absolutely heartbreaking for me to make that decision to not do that, even though I was the third person. But my integrity was completely, though in some ways I was given permission to do that, it did not feel like that was okay just because I didn't know the other person. It
Yeah.
didn't feel
Yeah.
okay.
Well, good for you, because it's that you've heard that the definition of discipline is remembering what you want. And sometimes what you want in the moment isn't aligned with what we want in the big picture. Like, I really want to eat the ice cream and I also want to lose 5 pounds. So you've got to decide what you want in the big picture. And for you, your integrity was more important in that situation than getting what you wanted in the moment.
Damn it, I really wanted the ice cream.
I know, girl. I know.
Made me fussy.
Yes. Well, we just wanted to pop on and give you guys a brief response to some of the cool things we've heard from you about our last episode. We hope you will tune in this week. We will be releasing episode 8 on Thursday. And we are excited to share some things with you guys. We have a big reveal coming up for you, as a matter of fact, in episode 8. So stay tuned for that. So thank you, as always, for listening to the Dateable AF podcast, where we help you find your happy ending.
And be bold, be kind, and for the love of queer dating, don't text your ex. Stay dateable
AF.